Welcome to the Special Parent Podcast. I'm Dr. Deanna Iverson, a proud mom of 3 boys and 2 incredible kids with special needs. I'm here to remind you that you're not alone on this journey. Whether you're navigating the highs, the lows, or those moments in between, this podcast is your weekly dose of hope, help, and heartfelt guidance. Together, we'll celebrate the victories, tackle the challenges, and connect with a community that truly understands. So grab your favorite cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and let's embark on this empowering journey together. You've got this. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Special Parent Podcast. I'm Dr. Deanna Iverson, and I have a special guest with me here today, my husband and daddy, Brian.
How you doing?
So we're here today to talk to you about those moments when you say, what the heck do I do with this behavior my child just chose? And this can be the reason Dad is here is this can be one of those huge contentions in marriage is how do I discipline? How do I handle a behavior? What am I going to do about? And that can be something that can really weigh on a marriage. And that's why I wanted to make sure to kind of have a conversation with us about what are some things that we've done. And then also what are some things that we can suggest for you guys. This is going to be a 3-part episode. The next 2 will be audio only, just so you know. One of the things we're going to talk about, though, is first I'm going to talk a little bit about when we know our child struggles with understanding. How do we discipline when we know understanding is a struggle? Yep. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about first. The reality is when special needs kids are born and we start recognizing that there's problems, we as parents already jump in knowing there's going to be special circumstances. They're going to have challenges. And at times that can make us go, well, if we know that they're already struggling and challenging, how can I discipline my child? You know, like, is it fair to punish them for certain behaviors when I know they're struggling their own?
And then in our case with 2 other boys at home, in the context of how we discipline our other boys who don't struggle with these disabilities, how do we manage that dynamic as well?
Yes. Well, mom and dad, and I'm sure anybody with siblings gets this, you let so-and-so do such and such.
Do you set the bar differently or do you not? And I you know, my inclination is to, he's got to function in the real world. And so I tend to try not to set a different bar, but then there are times where I just feel like I have to set a different bar.
And I think we all struggle with that for sure. And so one of the things is it's key for children. Discipline is to train behavior. It's not about punishment. It's not about anything other than making the child start to understand, oh, there are limitations to how I can behave and function in the world. Because we know that our behavior in our workplace, in social atmospheres, et cetera, is going to dictate our social groups, is going to dictate our success. So when we as parents start to discipline, we have to have a goal. And our goal has to be training behavior. Our goal is not punishment. Our goal is not to make somebody else in the store feel okay that we punished our kid. Because that sometimes comes up. You know, you're embarrassed and everything else. You want to feel like you have to look like you're a good parent. The goal really is training the behavior of the child, not worrying about the rest of the world's reaction to it.
Yep.
So first things first, and I want you to know I've got a lot of resources on specialparent.org specifically about this topic because I did some research with children that struggle with understanding and children that are slower in the learning departments. How can we really help guide behavior? And there are some key principles that work for all children, especially children with those. So key principle number 1, praise the good and do your best to ignore the bad.
That's hard.
Isn't it? Almost impossible sometimes.
I mean, and it's by no means a unique challenge to parents of kids with disabilities.
Right.
You know, the key there is seeing it from their perspective or their capability versus what you know about how the world works or how a behavior how you should behave in a given situation.
Right.
And but it is compounded with kids with disabilities.
It is because any attention we give our child is attention.
Yeah.
So if your child is sitting there going, mom, 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 and you turn around and go, mom's not going to talk to you until you stop hitting her, but you just did. You just talk to your child, so it's that struggle between when do we do it too? When do we discipline?
It's so hard. Like, cause on one hand, I feel like you have to show them what kind of a real world reaction they might get. Like there is going to be negative reaction, negative reinforcement out there where it's like, oh, wow, they're really pissed off that I did that or said that or acted that way. So how do you as a parent balance positive reinforcement, which I believe is really the best way to get them to outgrow bad behaviors and to grow up to be good functioning members of our community, is positive reinforcement. So a lot of it, I guess, comes down to, our own awareness of when we're being that negative or getting angry.
Right. And our awareness
which isn't their fault.
Our awareness of the positive moments. How many times do things are going well and all we think is okay, don't say anything. It's going good right now.
Yes.
Don't jinx it. So I think sometimes we almost don't recognize the positive because we're so happy it's going well. We just want to enjoy the moment. Yeah. And so our attention is required sometimes when it's negative, and therefore that creates a problem. So one of the tips that they talked about in my research was, when it's safe and possible, if your child is behaving a certain way, leave the room or just turn your back. Simply the action of turning your back, you stay in the room, those kinds of things, turning your back, and then counting to 30 and acting like you're completely distracted by something else. If they are doing that attention to get your behavior, they might escalate it. They might say, all right, well, let's try a little harder then. But if they're safe and you're able to turn your back and wait for them to sometimes just get distracted by something else. Okay, that didn't get what I wanted. Move on to the next topic. Or change the behavior. So now they're going to change the behavior because that one didn't work. So one of the things they said is, if you can leave the room, great. If you can't leave the room, again, safety is priority. Turn your back. Try to just give that, close your eyes. Don't give them that direct attention for whatever that behavior is, and wait for the behavior to change. As long as safety stays the key thing. I remember we used to have checklists for the kids when they were younger, and they would be able to, caught being good. And so it was kind of like a star chart, or something, but ours was a checklist, and they would caught being good. So that helped me and the kids, because the kids would walk up, Mom, did you see that? That could get me a token, or, And so that was one way to reinforce positive behavior.
Yep.
And then I do remember we taught our kids, put your hand on me. So I'm talking to an adult.
And they do that to this day.
To this day. My 17-year-old just did that yesterday.
When you need my attention and I am in a conversation with somebody else, put your hand on my shoulder. I absolutely know that you need my attention. And so two things will happen. I'm going to speed along whatever conversation or not speed along.
Or recognize a natural pause.
I'm gonna find a natural pause to then come to you. And all things, delayed gratification,
Yeah. Yeah. It teaches patience, right? We got to teach patience. I put my hand. So a lot of times it's on my shoulder. I'll put my hand on the shoulder. So on top of theirs, they put their hand, I put my hand. And then that lets them know I recognize you're here.
Touch them back. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And sometimes, especially as they've gotten older, the wait time has been extended and gotten longer. Or there are other times I've been like, I really do need to finish this.
Yep.
Can you go write down what you want to tell me? If they can write. Or something like that. And that's kind of helped too.
I think that this one little thing that we've done with them, I'm sure of it has helped them with their patience, generally speaking, with other people, and not just trying to break into a conversation, but just the overall idea that others in the room or in the event matter, and I need to wait my turn. I think it's probably gone a long way for that.
Yeah, I bet you're right. It's helped in that way too. Didn't think of that. All right. Tip number two, determine why the behavior is happening. A lot of times when we have behaviors, especially if they're more on the extreme scale, we react as parents. Whoa, stop. What are you doing? And that reaction in and of itself is the attention. If we can take a deep breath, maybe not turn our back because we have to maintain the safety, but even if we can take a deep breath and just take for ourselves, the one who's still not in their emotional brain, and think for 30 seconds, why did my kid do that? So for an example, I'm just going to say siblings because we have boys. two siblings are playing together and all of a sudden we see one hit the other, which is very typical for boys. One hit the other. Instead of going, oh, we don't hit, shame on you. We take 30 seconds and we analyze the situation. Why did the hit happen? Okay, so now we're going to go over and maybe even have a little bit of a conversation, or maybe we know why the hit happened and we can say, hey, I understand you're really mad that your brother just took the toy you were playing with, but we don't hit. So let's practice what we do instead. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the key thing, is if we can understand why their behavior happened, we can help them learn a more productive way to deal with it and then practice. I'm a big person. I guess it's because I'm a counselor. I'm a big person in practice. Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to practice it. You're going to be playing with the toy. Okay, brother, take the toy.
Yeah, I mean, practice is that's in all, we should be practicing in all facets of our life. I mean, in work, practice how you will relate to customers in given circumstances. I mean, that's, to me, that's an ideal activity for any kid growing up, but especially certain children with disabilities who might have cognitive deficiencies or autism, if they're on the spectrum and they struggle with, understanding people's body language and things like that. I mean, practicing can definitely help them to recognize as they grow older and manage themselves in situations a lot better, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not always a good time to practice. Mm-hmm. So the example I gave was that perfect scenario when you could now sit down and have the practice time, but that's not always going to be the way it is. So sometimes we have to say, nope, we're not going to do that. And we have to remember as parents to come back to it later and talk about it and still practice. So we can practice the how do I react when my sibling takes the toy, but then we can practice with the other sibling asking for the toy and the whole thing. So it can become a big ordeal with that, which means sometimes we don't have time, but we have to remember to come back to it and at least readdress it with the kids. All right. So tip number 3. We as parents have to model the appropriate behaviors we expect ourselves, which isn't easy sometimes. My son said to me that, Mom, I've seen you lose your mind sometimes and yell at us. And I'm like, yes, I have. Mm-hmm. And yet I tell them, don't yell at your sibling. And I've yelled myself. So when we get confused, when we get bothered, when we get flustered, the best thing for us to do is work on our emotional control, model it for ourselves, or if we don't do a good job, back around and address it with our kids. You saw Mom, Dad lose their temper. That wasn't good of me to do, and then kind of process it with them. And even with kids that have a hard time understanding, they can understand a lot of times when you say, I'm sorry that I yelled at you, or I'm sorry I raised my voice, and I know that was probably scary for you. Those kinds of things. So modeling the behavior ourselves can be a challenge.
And what goes along with that is modeling responsibility and taking responsibility for times where you were absolutely not at your best, which we all are as parents. Right. Nobody is immune to these type of situations where you kind of lose your cool a little bit and you get a little angry and that kind of thing. I mean, one of the things I'm trying to teach our boys is to take responsibility for when they are adults, or if when they become parents. Your kids need to see you take responsibility for when you mess up, because they need to know you're not perfect. Right. That they don't need to be, they don't need to be perfect either. Perfect humans. Exactly. We all need to be working to improve ourselves, but taking responsibility is a huge part of personal development. So absolutely.
The next tip is give choices when you can. Now, we can't always give choices, but if we start giving choices, what we teach is independence. We teach independence. So an example, it says a time-directed request. So there's 2 different ways to use countdown. One is effective for discipline and one is not. So for example, if you say, hey, bedtime is in 5 minutes. All right, everyone, bedtime's in 3 minutes. Bedtime's in 1 minute. Start your musical countdown. That's an effective way because it's giving them a heads up that something is coming, and especially with ADHD kids, that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 minutes probably felt the same to them every single time. So for them, they need that countdown. It's really good for them. In fact, sometimes I need it for myself. Oh, look at that. I have a friend who says that she has a music playlist that's exactly the amount of time it takes her to get ready in the morning, and she hits that playlist. So she tracks her time.
I find that time blindness can be a problem when it comes to, I
Yes.
totally agree. Those countdowns we use all the time. But there have been plenty of times, especially with our youngest one, where, 20 minutes and then 10 minutes. And then it's like, he didn't even hear the 10-minute one. And then I come in and say 5 minutes. And he goes, wait a minute, you just said 20 minutes. I did 15 minutes ago.
Right. So the countdowns can be beneficial, but it does help teach independence.
Yeah.
When it's not effective, though, is when you say, I asked you to go pick up that toy. You need to go pick it up. 4, 3.
Oh, yeah.
You're counting for compliance. You're giving them power. And we don't want to do that. We want to really work on the fact that it's like,
That's interesting because that's a power. As a parent, we've all done that. Mm-hmm. It feels like a power move for us.
Yeah.
But you're saying it has the opposite effect.
Has the opposite effect. Gives them power. Oh, I have 5 seconds. I can delay this.
Yeah.
I don't have to pick it up for 5 more seconds. And kids are master manipulators because that is what they are built to do. Mm-hmm. They are built to find the limits that are set for them. And if the limit is I can wait 5 more seconds to pick up that toy and comply, well, I've already gotten away with not doing it the first time. Now they're counting down. I get away with it a little bit longer. So it gives them kind of that power. And we want to teach them independence, but we don't want to teach them power. We want to also teach compliance because your boss is going to expect compliance or you're not going to be hired. One of the other ones too was giving them kind of that countdown as in the option of saying, hey, I need you to go put your laundry away, or I need you to pick up the toys. Do you want to stop right now and do that? But I see you're in a game. Would you rather finish this round?
See, I like that because that also demonstrates respect for them, and kids need to be respected also by their parents. Kids are their own person, and I think it's important for them to also feel a sense of respect. So that's you respecting their boundary, which is a good thing. That's not a bad thing,
right?
Kids need to have their own boundaries.
Exactly, they really do. They really do, and when they feel that, I think they feel, oh, I have a choice right now. It gives them the right power and
positive
control.
Empowering, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that that's a key factor that we want to work in with children is understanding when it's appropriate to have choices and when it's appropriate to just comply.
Yep.
So, all right. Consequences must relate to behavior. So, for example, every perfect consequence loses its effectiveness if it doesn't actually challenge or change the behavior that you're looking for. And you had a great one with our youngest and the cell phones recently. You were noticing that, well, I mean, they all walk around like this nowadays.
Yep.
In fact, half of the adults do. So everyone has a cell phone. It's a mini computer in our hands. We function every day with it. It's communication.
Yep.
There's nothing evil in and about the cell phone itself. But especially with young children, it's become such a distraction device that you go, okay, the consequence is that I said something to you. You didn't want to be interrupted on your cell phone, so you were they kind of become this monster that comes out.
Yep.
And it's like, wait, hold on a minute. What happened? So you talked to our son a little bit about putting your cell phone down for conversation times.
Right. But it was, so we went out to breakfast together and we were sitting there and he was on his phone and I was not on my phone. And I just sort of nudged him and I said, so, tell me, what are you going to do for the rest of today after breakfast today? And he puts his phone down and he starts telling me, what his day's going to be like. And then he goes to pick up his phone and I go, I'm keeping my phone over there so I can talk to you. And he without telling him directly to do it, he did that. He pushed his phone away. And for the next 45 minutes that we were there at the table, he did not touch his phone. It was amazing. And it was awesome.
Yeah, that is amazing. Yeah. 45 minutes of not touching their phone.
45 minutes.
Usually that's the consequence.
I was monitoring. This was like a social experiment. Like I was like, what's going on here? I've been to lean into this.
Let's admit it. We all do social experiments with our children.
But not every kid's again, kids are all pretty much addicted to their phones and it's very
And when we know
they
love something like a phone, typically that's the consequence. Let's take away the thing that they like.
Yeah.
But if it's not related to the behavior, it's not helpful.
Yeah.
So, for example, I noticed that one night we heard noise coming from our son's bedroom, and I was like, I think he has his phone in there. I think he took his phone in. So it was like It's funny. I said, call him.
Yeah.
He answered his phone. We're like,
Yes,
So-
what, Dad?
So the next day it was, I want you to be responsible with your cellular device because it's going to be with you the rest of your life.
Now
So you need to learn some limitations.
Let's clarify real quick. So this is our oldest, and we do have a standing rule that phones aren't allowed to be in the room, but we did make an exception for our oldest because he
was demonstrating
uses it-
responsibility.
He was, to the best that we could track, but he was using it for music at night. He really needed it. We tried the Google speaker thing, but for some reason that didn't work.
And he
out.
does, when I wake him up in the morning, the music's playing.
But our oldest is on the spectrum, and he'll put the same song on. It'll just loop the whole night.
It would drive me insane.
For him,
loves it.
that's comforting. So I just want to clarify.
Yeah. So
why
we
we're
had the
allowing
talk
that.
the next day. I said, you have earned the privilege of having your phone in there at night because you've demonstrated responsibility. And last night we caught you not being responsible.
Yeah.
So this is your only warning. The consequence will be you won't have your phone in your room again. We haven't heard a peep since.
Yeah.
And he's been falling asleep at a regular time, and I do peek in there sometimes to check. And he's making sure to wake up. He's not having trouble sleeping during the day or anything else like that. So it seems to be.
And I know what
an
some of our
effect.
listeners are saying right now. Well, he probably has earbuds in or something like that. But we check on that, and he doesn't wear those to bed.
He actually has earned that responsible privilege.
Yeah.
But it's taken time. In fact, our middle son will ask us, why does older brother get to do this? And I've had to say, because he's demonstrated responsibility. And I know you're still working on that responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's been a good behavior modification conversation because it's not anyone doing anything wrong. It's answering the question as to why is someone getting a privilege I don't get? Well, because they've demonstrated responsibility. So I'm not even having to talk about punishments. I'm getting to talk about rewards.
Yeah.
I'm getting to talk about that. And I think that's a great opportunity. So if you don't have siblings for your kids, if you see people out in the world, they get to have this job or do this privilege because they've demonstrated responsibility.
Yeah.
Driving is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to earn the privilege to drive, and it's more than just a license. It's the responsible driver behind the wheel, all the parts of driving. So I kind of sidetracked. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Consequences relate to behavior. So if they're refusing to do something and we consequence just because they like to do something else, sometimes that helps, but then sometimes it will not. And key thing to learn is, did the consequence change the behavior?
Mm-hmm.
If the consequence did not change the behavior, then it wasn't the right consequence.
Yeah.
And you're going to have that happen. I know we've had that happen. And so you move on, and next time you try the next thing, or you try what you hope will work again.
Yep.
So it don't worry if your consequence doesn't work every time. Just kind of say, okay, I learned from that. Now what am I going to try different next time?
Don't worry about it, but also recognize
Mm-hmm.
that it might not be working and you need to try something else.
Yes. All right. Hardest part. Last tip. Consistency. It really is hard, especially when we know that our special needs kids are slower learners.
Yeah.
A lot of times, slower learning means it's going to take a lot more time for them to learn something. And you will see that children their age have figured something out, and you're saying to yourself, they still don't have it. And that can be absolutely exhausting as a parent to go, okay, we're going to do this again. We're going to keep on doing this.
Right.
And sometimes it makes you question, is it working?
Yep.
Sometimes it makes you question, is it working? Do I need to do something different? Other times it just means I just have to keep sticking with it. And that's such an individual.
And that is hard as a parent. You often question yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody does. Like, why is that not working? I usually think I'm a good dad, but situation's making me feel like I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Right. Oh yeah.
But sticking with it, committing to it.
And if you have multiple caregivers in the house, like if you're lucky enough to have and respite providers or occupational therapists coming into your home,
that creates a lot of consistency.
Yeah, you have to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
And we've had to have those conversations. And I know we've even talked about, oh, that's exhausting. And luckily we have a good relationship with the caregiver. And so she's even come to us and said, So I noticed the way that you or Brian or whoever did something, and I had a thought about that. And I appreciate that about her because that took some serious guts.
Oh, yeah.
She's in our house. These are our kids. But she really honestly cared about their development. That's why she was giving that suggestion. But I have to tell you, it really was like a punch in the gut to have someone else kind of critiquing, how it was handled. But at the same time, it got us on the same page together, further along. And at the end of the day, our kids saw a team of people who have the same expectations and consistently are handling things the same way. And I think that was really key. That was my last one. So remember, key things here. When we talk about disciplining children, regardless of age and abilities, anything and everything we do, we are trying to modify behavior so that they can be more successful in social groups, in work groups, in general, so that they can just have happier experiences with family together. They can have happier experiences with friends. We want our children to learn behavior modification for their own benefit. So it's okay to keep trying. It's okay to never give up. And it's absolutely 100% okay to say that didn't work and I'm going to have to try something else. Reach out through social media groups, reach out through any sort of like autism group, utilize therapists, utilize counselors, and talk about discipline strategies and be okay to say the old ways that worked for someone or the ways that worked for one child aren't going to be the same for everybody. So, and we know that can be exhausting. If you need anything, reach out. Specialparent.org. We're here for you guys. So thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.
This program is made possible by friends and partners of the Special Parent Podcast. For more information and to join our mailing list, visit specialparent.org.